At 6 p.m. on a Tuesday here in Korea, welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let's start with the headlines. To come up with an effective response to North Korea's latest provocation, Seoul's top nuclear envoy is set to meet with representatives of the six-party denuclearization talks throughout the week. They're being called the 4 vaccination projects against corruption. South Korea's prime minister announces a series of anti-corruption initiatives, including heightened monitoring and prevention. A small recovery by the Chinese yuan was a positive sign, but it wasn't enough to fully stabilize markets, and the Korean won slid further against the greenback to its lowest level in 5.5 years. We begin with the ongoing international efforts to punish North Korea for its latest nuclear tests. South Korea's top nuclear envoy has lined up a series of meetings with his counterparts from the United States, Japan, China, and Russia that will center on Pyongyang's latest provocation. While coordination with all 4 is very important, China's response is crucial, given its influence over its longtime ally. Connie Kim has our top story.
South Korea's top nuclear envoy, Hwang Jung-guk, will be holding a series of talks with representatives to the 6-party denuclearization talks, involving the U.S., Japan, China, and Russia this week. Through the talks, Seoul is hoping to formulate an effective response to Pyongyang's 4th nuclear test last week.
The government is putting in all efforts to bring about a strong and effective UN Security Council resolution through the meetings with the U.S., Japan, China, and Russia. We are also working to form a united international response against Pyongyang's provocation.
First up on the list is a meeting with the U.S. and Japanese top nuclear envoys Sung Kim and Kimihiro Ishikane in Seoul on Wednesday. Discussion will likely focus on a strong and comprehensive UN Security Council resolution. The 3 are expected to call on China, North Korea's closest ally, to play an active role, as it now seems to be taking a more lax stance compared to immediately after Pyongyang's test. The South Korean nuclear envoy will then meet with his Chinese counterpart Woo Da-wei in Beijing on Thursday to get China's assessment of North Korea's claimed hydrogen bomb test and discuss the degree of sanctions that'll be agreed upon at the UN. Wrapping up this series of talks will be a bilateral meeting between Hwang and the Russia's Deputy Foreign Minister Igor Morgulov next Tuesday in Moscow. But discussions on possible responses to Pyongyang's nuclear provocation will not end there. Vice ministerial-level officials from South Korea, the U.S., and Japan are set to meet in Tokyo on Saturday to deliberate on results of talks between their respective nuclear envoys. However, there are concerns close cooperation between the 3 countries will make it hard for Beijing to take a strong stance against North Korea, as it will not want to lose risking its strategic asset. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
A new missile defense plan will be added to an upcoming round of combined drills between South Korea and the U.S. this spring to better counter Pyongyang's missile capabilities. Our Defense Ministry correspondent Kim Yeon-bin has the details.
South Korea and the United States have a new plan for countering North Korean missiles. It's called 4D, and a version of it will not be part of an annual round of bilateral military exercises called Key Resolve and Full Eagle, which use computer-based simulations and field exercises. 4D stands for Detect, Disrupt, Destroy, and Defend. As part of the 4D plan, the drills will feature state-of-the-art weaponry and surveillance equipment, including U.S. military satellites and high-altitude surveillance drones. Experts say the surveillance equipment can detect enemy missiles in less than a minute and destroy the missiles in midair within 5 minutes after launch. The 4D plan was adopted during an annual bilateral security meeting in November, where South Korean Defense Minister Han Min-koo and U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter endorsed the concept as a way to better counter nuclear-tipped warheads and biochemical weapons from the North. However, some experts say the 4D plan, though ideal, is unrealistic.
The Korean military currently can't fully execute the 4D plan, as it requires missile defense and attack methods. To make it possible, an enormous budget is needed, so realistically the plan is impossible.
The 4D plan will be incorporated into the simulation portion of the joint military exercises, which will now be held in early March, after the date was moved up following North Korea's 4th nuclear test last week. Kim Yeon-bin, Arirang News.
The Korean government has rolled out a multi-billion-dollar project aimed at rooting out corruption at the source. For details, we turn to Shin Se-min.
The government has pledged to launch a new set of multi-billion-dollar anti-corruption initiatives with a renewed focus on preventing and eradicating corruption. Speaking at the central government complex in Seoul, Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn said Tuesday the initiatives will shift the current focus of anti-corruption efforts from punishment and exposure to prevention and monitoring, particularly among public officials.
The handling of corruption has been response-oriented, resulting in a significant waste of public resources and damage to the public. We need to adopt a new proactive system that will help counter corruption in advance.
The anti-corruption initiative targets 16 public sectors responsible for overseeing roughly $199 billion in state funds this year. The systems will be applied to a number of national projects, including preparations for the 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympics. As part of its plans, the government will conduct real-time monitoring of large-scale infrastructure projects and set up a system for spotting flaws in how government subsidies and state-funded research and development projects are allocated and used. The Prime Minister also said the government will reorganize its risk management department and establish a multi-step surveillance system through compliance officers for Korea's Postal Service, which is in charge of managing some $86 billion in state funds. The government is hopeful that the new measure will save up some $4.1 billion worth of state fund over the coming year, as well as boost transparency and regain the public's trust. Shin Se-min, Arirang News.
Taking a look at the stock market now, after days of volatility, China seems to have found some solid ground, with its main market showing a slight rebound at the close of trading day today. It's a major improvement from the nosedive it took in the first week of the year, but for Korea and other Asian countries, trading remains rather choppy. Lee Ji-won explains further.
Korea's benchmark Kospi index continued its fall on Tuesday despite a rebound in Chinese shares. It dropped just over 0.2%, closing below the psychologically significant 900 mark. In China, shares bounced back with the Shanghai Composite Index closing up more than 0.2%. The Shenzhen also edged up nearly 0.4%.
The slight recovery in China is not big enough to say that the market there is stabilizing, so other Asian shares won't feel a positive impact. Also, there are domestic concerns dragging the Korean market due to the poor performance of big local companies like Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix.
Korea's tech giant Samsung Electronics shed over 0.5%, while chipmaker SK Hynix lost almost 3% at Tuesday's close. The local currency also lost ground, ending at 1,210 won against the US dollar, dropping to a 5.5-year below. Lee Ji-won, Arirang News.
Global oil prices have sunk to a 12-year low due to concerns about a growth slowdown in China, as well as a continuing global supply glut. This month's U.S. benchmark West Texas Intermediate fell below $32 a barrel, the lowest since December 2003. Europe's benchmark Brent North Sea crude also slipped to $31.48 a barrel, the lowest since April 2004. Analysts say the price drop is mainly driven by worries over the grim economic outlook for China, the world's second-largest consumer of oil. Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs predicted oil prices could fall further to a range of $20 to $25 a barrel. The Bank of Korea will release its new growth outlook for this year ahead of announcing its key interest rate on Thursday at the first monetary policy meeting of the year. Hwang Jae looks at how much the central bank could lower its previous forecast.
3.2%. That's the forecast the Bank of Korea currently holds for the country's economy this year. It's in stark contrast with figures released by other major financial institutions that expect Korea's GDP to expand in the 2% range. And with the central bank set to announce a new growth outlook on Thursday, a downgrade in the current projection is widely expected.
Uncertainties stemming from the U.S. Federal Reserve's rate hike and instability in China's financial market, coupled with factors at home like the sluggish consumer sentiment, will dim the outlook for this year.
The focus is now on how much the central bank will cut from its existing forecast. Analysts say slashing it to the 2% range won't be an easy decision for the BOK to make, as it could further heighten uncertainties about slumping economic conditions among households and in the corporate sector. But with a trim looking almost certain this time, there are also rising expectations for another rate cut down the road, especially as Korea holds on to its strong economic fundamentals.
Except for the US dollar, the Korean won is maintaining its stability against other currencies. Global ratings agency Moody's also viewed Korea's financial market as being relatively sound, and that means a rate cut won't lead to a major capital outflow.
Some add it's inevitable for Korea to jump into the so-called currency war with a rate cut as countries like China and Japan, Korea's major export rivals, try to drag down their currency values. Analysts say it could come as early as in the first quarter of this year if the economy fails to show signs of a strong recovery momentum. 황지혜, Arirang News.
President Park Geun-hye will begin receiving policy briefings from her cabinet from this Thursday. Now in her fourth of 5 years in office, President Park has asked her ministers to focus on targeted goals. She also wants to make sure the public can feel the result of her policies. For a rundown of what to expect this year, we turn to Song Ji-sun.
President Park's goal this year is not to introduce a new initiative, but to introduce tangible results from consistent policy directions, as it's the last year of a 3-year economic innovation plan and a finish line for major reforms in labor, finance, education, and public sectors. The key tasks continue to be aimed at structural reforms to create growth engines for the next 30 years. In teams grouped under 5 themes, relevant government agencies and ministries will report their status and plans over the next 2 weeks. The sessions that begin Thursday are aimed at revitalizing the economy by balancing domestic demand and exports, involving 7 economy-related ministries and commissions. Next up, a group led by the Ministry of Future Planning seeks to boost growth engines through Park's Creative Economy Initiative and cultural prosperity. In the third briefing, job creation for youth and customized welfare will be the keywords to counter high youth unemployment and the country's low birth rate. On January 22nd, chiefs of foreign affairs, national defense, and unification will lay out their blueprint for building the groundwork for peaceful reunification of the 2 Koreas. The ministers are also set to indicate their countermeasures to North Korea's latest nuclear threats. In the last session, Ministries of the Interior, Justice, and Public Safety will lay out their plans for innovating the nation. The administration's goal is to come up with concrete plans for these tasks so that the people can actually feel the effect of major policies.
The annual briefing and format is given to the president from the ministers, but the president has asked them to make it as a report to the nation and the people. The cabinet members are preparing the presentation accordingly.
To make sure ordinary people get involved in policy setting, this year's briefings will also include debates with civilians and experts taking part so that they can together project the actual impact of proposed policies for the people. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
We're just 2 days into the National Assembly's month-long extraordinary session, and the country's 2 main rival parties are still deadlocked over a series of controversial bills. Meanwhile, the Minju Party of Korea can't seem to stop the mass exodus of lawmakers from its ranks, threatening its chances and possibly its existence ahead of a general election in April. Kim Young-gil has the latest.
As the legislative impasse continues at the National Assembly, the ruling Saenuri Party vowed to try to get things moving by working more closely with the government on key plans.
The delay in the passage of labor reform and economy-related bill is a heavy burden on the Korean economy. Our party will work with the government to manage state affairs and look after people's livelihoods in the face of the continuing uncertainties in the Korean economy.
The ruling party urged the main opposition Minju Party of Korea to refrain from blocking important bills, adding that despite accusations to the contrary from the opposition, it had made enough concessions during negotiations. The Minju Party seemed more focused on its recruitment efforts as lawmakers and party members continued to defect to the new party launched by former opposition co-chair An Cheol-soo. and left in December over a leadership struggle with current party chair Moon Jae-in.
It is sad that lawmakers are leaving our party, but we have renewed hope as we are boldly recruiting new figures and nearly 100,000 people have joined us by registering online. I will work with my remaining colleagues to build new hope for the party.
12 lawmakers and dozens of other party members have left the Minju Party since An's departure. And on Tuesday, another Minju Party lawmaker, Choi Won-sik, quit, bringing the total number of assembly seats held by the party down to 115. The mass exodus has left the party on the verge of splitting even further down factional lines, with fewer than 100 days remaining before a general election on April 13th. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
A huge explosion has hit Turkish capital Istanbul on Tuesday morning. According to local media there, the blast hit Sultanahmet Square, that is a popular tourist spot. Casualties and injuries have been reported. However, there are still no official numbers. It is also not known what caused the blast yet. The Korean embassy in Istanbul has confirmed that there were Korean nationals among those injured. Moving on, around 50 people have been killed in 4 separate attacks by Islamic State militants in Iraq. One of the attacks on Monday evening local time targeted a shopping mall in the center of Baghdad. Witnesses say a car bomb went off, then militants ran in, spraying people with bullets. Security forces stormed the building and killed 2 of the attackers. 18 people were reportedly killed in that attack. 3 other bombings also happened in or around the Iraqi capital on Monday evening, killing 25 to 30 others. In a statement claiming responsibility, ISIS said the attacks targeted Shiite Muslims and it warned worse was yet to come. And that brings us to the end of this hour's newscast. Do join us at 10 p.m. for more. Thanks for watching.